Welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today to let you folks watching know what's going on at your state capitol in Albany, we have Assemblyman Brian Curran. Brian Curran represents the 21st Assembly District. That includes parts of Nassau County. So again, our job to let you folks on Long Island know what's going on in Albany, because what goes on here always comes back to affect you folks there. And Brian Curran, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
We got a lot to get caught up on. Obviously, it's budget season at the state capitol. And while the word is starting to sound optimistic that maybe we're close to the conclusion of the budget process here in Albany, we're also a month past due of when this budget was supposed to be done and in place.
Yeah, that's a sad state of affairs. We're 4 weeks past. That has fiscal ramifications for both our local governments and our school districts back home. Like I said, in 2010 when I first came in here, we had on-time budgets for the next 8 years. Unfortunately, it seems as if the legislature is falling back into that bad habit of, not doing their job on time and getting a budget passed. And that, like I said, that has effects back home that people may not be aware of.
Part of this is due to this new idea about inserting policy issues into the numbers crunching, if you will. I'm going to ask you for some quick reaction if you've heard anything about how some of the big topics are panning out in this budget negotiations. I'll just provide the caveat that things can change at the last minute. So even though this is what we're hearing as these budget talks wind up, things may change. Crime, violent crime, spiking all across the state, in New York City, on Long Island, even in rural upstate New York. You're feeling good about what you're hearing?
Yes, so what we're hearing out of the budget negotiations is that there is a conceptual agreement in place with regards to amending the cashless bail reform. And as people know back home, that is one of the biggest factors that people have credited to the spiking crime over the past 4 years. I ran on it, so it's personally gratifying to me if we are successful in having an amendment to this. Because it's important. It's going to make our community safer, it's going to make our families safer, and I look forward to coming back and telling you, hopefully next week, about what those specific changes are. That's going to, like I said, have a real effect on putting crime down.
How about the governor's big housing initiative, which would have meant maybe some high-rise units in suburban Long Island near the Long Island Railroad stations?
It was a horrible plan, and we spoke about it before, Mike. The governor put this in. She first announced it at the State of the State. She then puts it into the governor's proposed budget. And what she was proposing is 2,500 units around every train station on Long Island. So in my district, every district has either 1 or 2 train stations. That's talking about 2,500 units, more units in a 3-year period. It was going to completely over-densify the area. It was going to have a severe impact on our services, on our school districts. It was a horrible idea from the get-go, and like you had said, we are receiving good news, and I think we actually have confirmation from the governor's office that she has pulled back that plan and will not be included in this budget, and that is a good thing for everyone back in Nassau County. We have, in the room right next to us, we have over 50,000 petitions that were signed by residents of the town of Hempstead that were sent over to us by Supervisor Don Clavin. They were supposed to be accepted by Governor Hochul's office, but she refused to do so. So we have them in this office. But this was across the board opposition to this plan, and I'm happy to report because of our fight, it's not going to be in there.
Any news on the proposed tuition hikes for SUNY and CUNY?
That too. My district has is just about all middle-class families who send their kids to SUNY and CUNY schools. The governor and the Democrats were looking for a tuition increase over the next 5-year period. Happy to report that's what's coming out, and also confirmed by news reports, is the governor has gone off of that and has taken it out of the budget. That language. So, as of right now, SUNY and CUNY will not have the ability to raise its tuition in the next 5 years, at least currently under this budget.
And I know at the beginning of this legislative session, you were talking about mental health funding and the need to have more funding to look into some of the mental health problems that, again, showing up in New York State, but across the country too. You're seeing all kinds of problems and issues that a lot of people say, you know, if we were able to understand it better and maybe spend a little more time with it, we could solve some of this.
Absolutely, and again, this was another campaign issue. I mean, I think a big part of the crime problem is mental health issues. I think a lot of the problems that our kids are experiencing because of COVID and social pressures are stemming from mental health issues. So I'm very happy to report, and the governor started this out from the beginning of our budget, is to increase funding for both mental health, for drug treatments. All aboard on that, supported from the first day, and I give credit to Governor Hochul to agree with me and to, find that those are problem areas that if we're going to put funds somewhere, that's the two areas that we should do it.
Let's start to talk about some of the numbers now. We talked about numbers crunching earlier. That's what budgeting is all about. People know from doing it in their own households. You got to somehow make the expenditures equal to the revenues that are coming in. And that's I mean, it seems easy, but in Albany, nothing is ever easy, I guess, sometimes. Because we're a month late, we have already seen tax day come and go. April 18th this year, because of the way the weekends and days fell. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of what the people of the state are dealing with when it comes to paying their taxes.
You know what, Mike? These days, it seems that we find a protest on every single issue. And on April 18th, if there was ever a reason to have a protest, tax day was it. Tax day here in New York should be something that everybody gets angry about, because let me give you these numbers. New York has the third highest overall taxes in the country. New York ranks 49th in overall state taxes. They rank 45th in income taxes, 43rd in real estate taxes, and 35th in sales tax. We are at the bottom of the barrel in all of those categories out of 50 states. We are the highest tax state. And then we look around and we ask ourselves, why are so many people leaving the state? And it's kind of self-evident right when you hear those numbers.
Yeah, well, I don't know too many people that I know, myself included, who don't get angry when tax day rolls around and you have to write out that check. But a lot of the headlines, too, that we see in newspapers all across the state seem to go right to these numbers that you're talking about. I mean, New York State's not doing well in almost any of these categories. And a lot of the headlines we see now mention the phrase outward migration. New Yorkers are leaving the state of New York. And I think there are statistics by companies like U-Haul that back this up, right?
Absolutely. And here's the way that that I would hope people look at it. First off, we are one of the highest tax states in the country. But I think the second question of everybody at home should be, okay, I am giving Albany my hard-earned money. How are you spending it? Are you spending it well? Are you being a good steward to our tax dollars? And I think if you look at some of these headlines that we're going to show, we're not being good stewards, and it's wasteful, and it is not helping the future of this state.
There's one headline that I just saw recently, talked about $11 billion in New York in unemployment fraud. That seems like quite a waste of money. $11 billion, it's not million, $11 billion in just unemployment fraud. Why can't the state figure this out?
They should. And think about that, what that is on our budget. Think about what it is on your budget at home, how much in state taxes you're paying. That is $11 billion going out the door for unemployment filings that should never have been approved, should have been caught, and that money should never have gone to those individuals. That is just one example of the complete waste of hard-earned tax monies up here in Albany. And that's not the only. There is so many examples up here of where waste and fraud should be detected, should be dealt with, but isn't.
The Medicaid program in New York is always, you hear one story after another about how the Attorney General, the IG, the Inspector General should be figuring out how to rein that in, but there doesn't seem to be the spirit to want to get that done.
Right. Listen, we pay the highest taxes, and there are certain areas where taxes should be applied, and we offer the gold standard. Education is one area. We should be paying a lot of money into our education, because that is a vital area. Taking care of our seniors is another vital area. But in doing that, there are other areas where we are literally just taking money and throwing it out the window. And those are the areas where we should be looking at to say, hey, listen, let's cut our spending. Let's make it more affordable to live here. Because if we do that, we will then start keeping some of the people that are leaving in droves for other states.
Nationally, there have been lots of news stories about the president and Congress when it was controlled by the Democrats in both houses, these trillion-dollar spending bills and how much that has gone to impact the inflation that we're seeing now at the gas pump and in the grocery stores and so forth. Is the same thing happening here in Albany? Because you've got a Democratic governor, you've got Democratic majorities in both houses. Same kind of spending issues going on here?
Absolutely. And Mike, let me just give you these numbers. So for the past 16 years, the Democratic Party has been the majority party in 2 out of the 3 branches, whether it be the governor, the Senate, or the Assembly. So since in 2006, the New York State budget was $112.5 billion. 16 years later, the New York State budget this year is being proposed at $230 billion.
That's doubled.
That's doubled. And based on the U.S. Census, here's the results of all of that spending. New York leads in population loss with people moving out of state. Between July 2021 and July 2022, New York lost 180,000 people. And if you go back to April 2020, the state has lost over 500,000 people. Think about that. 500,000 people have left New York for other states, mostly states like Florida and Texas, which have lower taxes, no income taxes. That is where they're flocking to.
And smaller budgets in
Yes.
Florida and Texas, right? Somebody said once, I believe, that you could take those 2 states, put their budgets together, and they're still not, the budgets don't add up to how much New York spends?
Yes, absolutely. Florida, Florida is a great example of a growing state whereby, their budget does not, they have 2.5 million more people than we do, but their budget is less than ours. So you tell me, who's doing a better job in the fiscal planning? Let me tell you one other thing, and this is a concern. So it is great, people always say, hey, listen, people have to pay their fair share. Here in New York State, that is the rallying cry. Let's make high earners pay more. But this is why it's important. High earners, right now, the top 1% of earners pay over 50% of all income taxes here in New York State. Between 19 and 2020, New York lost 20% of its high earners. What does that mean? You know what that means? Once those high earners leave New York State, our spending hasn't gone down. Who do you think Albany is going to look to pay those taxes? It's going to be the middle-class families of the 21st Assembly District, and that I can't have. That's why it's important not to drive high earners out of the state.
One of the other headlines we've seen is that looking at fiscal planning in the state of New York, they say there are projected deficits built into the budgeting from the last several years. So the deficit's getting bigger, but yet we know that the proposal for this coming year's budget is bigger than last year's. If you've got projected deficits, wouldn't you think you got to rein things in a little bit?
You would think so, and that's why, Albany budgeting is only as good as the next election. They're always looking towards the next election. We have had a flood of federal monies come into New York State over the last 2 years because of COVID for transit, for every other service. And you look at that, what did they do with that money? I'm not exactly sure, but I know this. This year, the Long Island Railroad is looking to increase fares on all middle-class families who use their trains to get into the city for their work. How is that possible? How is it possible that New York State is looking at a budget deficit next year when we're spending so much money this year? To Governor Hochul's credit, she is setting up a rainy day fund, which has been depleted over the past of the 10 years. But still, let's get our spending in order so that this state can move forward with at least some people in it, because if we keep going at this rate, everybody's going to be leaving.
Well, we're just going off the statistics, what the numbers show. We also, we're looking in generalities here, but also we can't say for certain what's happening now until these budget numbers come in and negotiations are done. So maybe we'll have to come back and revisit this and see if maybe things are going to be getting better.
I would love to say so. I know we're fighting, listen, myself and the rest of the Republican conference is fighting to make sure that we're spending every tax dollars wisely. And that's all that we can do. But of course, we're going to be back and we're going to report on exactly what was passed.
And in the meantime, if you folks want to reach out to your representative, it's an easy thing for you to do. You can get a hold of your Assemblyman, Brian Curran, at his office in Rockville Center by dialing 516-561-8216, or maybe the easiest thing for you to do, drop an email to curranb@nyassembly.gov. We thank you folks for spending your time with us today. Brian Curran, we thank you for joining us. We'll hope to see you soon for our next Assembly Update.